Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds.
We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front lines, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24 únicamente en i24 News.
We know that before releasing the hostages, they gave them pills, clonazepam, a mood stabilizer.
To make them feel high and look calm in pictures. This pill, if you're not used to it, it would give you a feeling of high, even if you are in a very poor mental state.
Our breaking news coverage continues. I'm Benita Levine. The Israeli War Cabinet is expected to address the nation shortly. That's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and War Cabinet member Benny Gantz. Their update is expected to include details of their meeting in recent hours with the families of the remaining 138 people still held captive by Hamas in Gaza. It's 60 days since they were abducted during the Hamas terror rampage on the 7th of October. More than 1,200 people were killed during that terror onslaught at a music festival in kibbutzim and moshavim and on bases in southern Israel, the darkest day in the country's 75-year history. Israeli leaders repeatedly reiterating they will eliminate Hamas, a terror group described as worse than ISIS. And of course, we will bring you those speeches from the War Cabinet as and when they happen. And now for more, we welcome to studio Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the US and former Israeli deputy foreign minister and the chairman of Silver Road Capital. And still with us, senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alterman. Danny, thank you so much for joining us. We've had much to discuss since the start of this broadcast, but top of mind right now is the 138 hostages, as confirmed by Daniel Hagari, the IDF spokesperson, during his briefing a short while ago, still held captive, and families desperate for answers, wanting to know how the fighting is going to impact the chances of them coming home.
Well, it's gut-wrenching, of course, heartbreaking. I think this probably would be the toughest decision that the War Cabinet will ever have to take during this campaign on the war of Gaza. But I think, and we will hear them pretty soon, hopefully, but I think that the message would be that we cannot stop short now. The momentum, you cannot play with the armored divisions, stop and go, stop and go. And right now, the campaign is going on full force in the Khan Yunis area, and of course, cleaning out and mopping up the Jabalia, the northern Gaza. And I believe that their rationale would be I'm not sure that the families of the kidnapped would accept it, but that they have to double down on the military pressure that this is the best chance to get the hostages out. And the families will have to live with it. I don't think there is any other choice at this point unless, and I think one of the things that have been entertained, among others, is to offer Sinwar an exit. You know, if he would release all the hostages, and he can and lay down the arms, he can get a free exit out of Khan Yunis to Qatar or wherever. So he Turkey. So he gets his life back to him with these cronies for the hostages. So Israel is ready to go a long way to get these hostages out, but it's not all depends on our decision. That's the thing is, it's pretty much Sinwar's call, unfortunately.
And at the end of the day, I actually think it's ours. The problem is, as you said, that at this moment in time, at this juncture, the price is just too high to get the hostages freed because it would mean ending the war. It would mean, let's be honest, it would mean losing the war. It would mean losing the war. And in that sense, this concept that these two goals of winning the war and freeing the hostages, well, it was said at the beginning that they're consistent with each other. It may be that argument has run its course. And Donnie, you said that the best way to free the hostages is to continue the war, but that just postpones the day of reckoning, because then you need to decide, do you want to win the war or do you want to free the hostages? I suppose what you're trying to say is that you could do both. You could achieve Israel's goals on the ground and under the ground in Gaza, let Sinwar go free, and then also get the hostages back. I suppose that scenario is live. It's I think from Israel's perspective, a best case realistic scenario. But again, I think we can't ignore the likelihood that at some point there are going to be choices made between these two goals.
But Owen and Benita, there is a flexibility here, which is what is the definition of victory. We can decide that the definition of victory is if we have Sinwar out, then that is part of the victory, because then after he's out and we get the hostages, then I think it is a position where Israel can really have its different choices for the future, and without actually also risking Israeli soldiers in trying to storm in the positions of Sinwar. If he's out, then it obviates the more military operations. So, you know, the war victory can be defined in different ways.
I think at the end of the day, I push back against that. Victory means, I think it's clear to the Israeli public that Hamas is no longer in control of the Gaza Strip. Absolutely. And its military capabilities are very significantly dismantled. Absolutely. I think that, to that degree, the definition of victory is not flexible. But you're right around the edges. In terms of Sinwar's fate, there obviously is room to play with.
Oh, and Danny, stay with us. We've got lots more to discuss on exactly this front. But right now, let's go to our correspondent, Zach Anders. He joins us from northern Israel. And earlier, Zach, red alert sirens sounding up north again, Kiryat Shmona, as well as Beit Hillel. What is the latest there? What update can you share right now?
Yeah, and we saw those videos of the interceptions taking place over Kiryat Shmona, where we are right now, at a location where one of the rockets fell, a bit of damage in the road, but no injuries to speak of. And that's the latest from the IDF, that there is no injuries in today's strikes on Kiryat Shmona. But it is significant to see these heavy rocket launches launched from deep inside southern Lebanon with quite a range, attempting to hit further targets here. We've heard the outgoing artillery targeting these positions where Hezbollah is supposedly launching these launch sites from. It also, I've been told that sometimes when we hear this artillery, it's not just in response, it's sometimes preemptive, as they see potentially Hezbollah moving into position to trying closer to the border. They try and close off roadways by continuing to fire on empty roads and attempt to show the Hezbollah fighters as they move in their vehicles that, hey, the IDF is still here. We still see you. Do not come this way.
Correspondent Zach Anders live from northern Israel. More to come from Zach, of course, in the coming hours. Thank you. Now, earlier in this broadcast, we spoke about the spike in anti-Semitism at American college campuses. Now we go to Belgium, where the focus falls on controversial educational material distributed by the UNRWA Relief Agency. Now, that's the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees. And we take a look at the steps that Europe could be taking to stop this. So we now welcome from Belgium, Sharon Haskell, member of the Parliament, the National Unity Party, joining us live from Brussels. Thank you so much. I understand you are busy with meetings as we speak, so we so appreciate your time. We know Germany has already moved to freeze its funding for UNRWA operations in Gaza indefinitely. Other European countries also taking steps. Talk us through the meetings you are involved in there to make sure that UNRWA doesn't get funds to keep fueling hatred in this region.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me and hosting me on the show. Those meetings are extremely important because here in the European Union, there are representatives from many different countries and also funds that are coming from the European Union into UNRWA and into the Palestinian Authority that are actually funding incitement and education system that is teaching to terror, to murders, that is really teaching young children hatred and racism towards Jews. I've been meeting many parliament members from the European Union from Holland and Romania and Germany and England and many more. Sorry, the English representatives are not here in the European Union, but they are here on a religious delegation, a Christian delegation as well. But my main focus is to speak to them about taking responsibility on the funds that they are transferring into UNRWA. UNRWA is not the solution. UNRWA is part of the problem. UNRWA is perpetuating the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and we've seen that in Gaza, employers, United Nations employers of UNRWA are actually members of Hamas. We've seen schools and hospitals of UNRWA as well that are being used as shields for terrorist organizations, for rocket launchers, for bunkers, for hiding places for these terrorists. The IDF is still collecting more and more evidence, but it's pretty clear that UNRWA is not part of the solution, and there has to be a reform in this organization.
One of the freed hostages says they were held by an UNRWA teacher. What kind of response are you hearing to this, a civilian teacher holding hostages in their home? Briefly.
So it's absolutely outrageous. And the explanation is mainly to, when UNRWA and when the United Nations is condemning Israel and warning that UN workers have been killed, they need to understand that many of those United Nations workers are actually UNRWA workers. Many of them are actually activists
our
of
combatants
Hamas.
as a continuation of Maccabees. Today, as in the past, they're fighting with courage, with great heroism and determination. And today, as then, we shall pray together for their safety and the safety of our country. We will give big salvation to our nation. I and the members of the cabinet met today with the families of their hostages, those who we managed already to bring back and those that were doing everything in order to bring them back. I heard heart-wrenching stories about thirst and hunger and physical and mental abuse, little children who still whisper the great darkness of their loved ones. I listened, and you did too, about sexual harassment and abuse and vicious incidents of rape. But I must say that until just a very few days ago, I didn't hear the organizations for human rights. I didn't hear the women's organizations or the UN organizations of women. I didn't hear their cry. And I say to them, where are you? You were silent because we're talking about Jewish women? I want to say it loud, in a language that everybody understands.
I say to the women's rights organizations, to the human rights organizations, you've heard of the rape of Israeli women? Horrible atrocities, sexual mutilation? Where the hell are you? I expect all civilized leaders, governments, nations to speak up against this atrocity. אני שותף מלא לדאגה העמוקה של המשפחות
The great concern of the families whose loved ones are still held in Gaza. I understand the uncertainty and the intolerable difficulty. I said to the families that we don't save any effort in order to bring back their beloved ones. Bringing the hostages back is one of the three objectives of this war, and they serve one another. We check every piece of information. There's a huge intelligence body that deals only with that around the clock. We are doing it with responsibility in order to bring back all our hostages back safely. And I say all of them is soldiers, men and women, civilians, men and women, young, old, all of them with no exception. And in any decision, bringing back the hostages is part of our concern. And we are on the right track. Today, I saw the little Emilia Aloni, age 6, going back to the kindergarten. The kindergarten teacher is hugging her. So do her little friends. And for one moment in these very dark hours, our heart fills with happiness. And it's not little in these days. We managed to bring back 110 of the hostages by a great force of ground operation and political effort. And I say to you, this is the only way to bring back the hostages who are still there in the captivity of Hamas. We're committed to doing it. Hamas tried to dismantle us. We're going to dismantle it. Many of the murderers came from Sajaria. They broke into the fence and committed these atrocities. In the beginning of the week, we eliminated the commander, one who actually commanded a lot of the atrocious things that happened in October 7. Until now, we eliminated half of the commanders of divisions. Anybody who was a partner, who kidnapped, who raped, who murdered, who burnt our people. We shall not forget and we should not forgive. We directed the IDF to continue the war. We continue the ground operation against Hamas everywhere in the Gaza Strip, including the south. We did it with huge force. And the earth shook in Khan Yunis and in Jabalia. We encircled both of them. There's no place we don't get to. We controlled the general command of security in Hamas. Our soldiers are holding face-to-face battles. They liquidate many terrorists in every battle. We are victorious. We fight to the end, up to the full victory. Our combatants are the real resilience and determination of the entire nation. But all this has a very heavy price. Every loss actually breaks our heart. Ben Zussman fell this week in Gaza. Ben was in the military engineering court. He was salt of the earth, a great sportsman. He was a real combatant. But together with Ben, 4 others, members of his school, high school in Jerusalem. Also, Aner Shapira, the combatant who saved the lives of many after he pushed back 7 grenades. Also, his other friends, Ariel from the Armored Corps, Shachar Friedman from the paratroopers, and Vera Barazani, also from the paratroopers. And I say this evening to the families of Ben, Aner, Ariel, Shachar, and Vir. I say to the dear families of all the fallen soldiers, your loved ones, our loved ones, did not fall in vain. We're going to fight together. We're going to be decisive. We are going to defeat it up to the victory until we achieve all our objectives. Bringing back the hostages, liquidating the Hamas, and Gaza will never again be a threat to Israel. We will ensure that there'll be no factor there who educates towards terror and funds it. And another word about a day after Hamas. Gaza must be demilitarized. And for that, there is only one force can make sure this demilitarization, and that is the IDF. No international force can be responsible for that. We saw what happened in other places where they brought international forces in order to demilitarize. I am not ready to shut my eyes and to get any other arrangement. I call again the civilians in Gaza to get out of their areas of battle. And I say to our friends all over the world who are pressuring us to finish the war, the only way to finish the war and to finish it quickly is to exert a decisive force against the Hamas, to eradicate it. If our friends want to help us to shorten the war, this is also their war against the barbarism that is controlling the world. They just have to stand erect next to us. And I say to them in English, any other language.
Stand with Israel. Stand with civilization.
Citizens of Israel, in my many visits in the area, I meet our combatants, men and women, our heroes of the IDF and the Shin Bet, the police. One of the combatants, Ariel, in the Armored Corps, he was sitting on top of his tank and he was talking to me in Gaza, in his tank, in other tanks in the area. Religious and secular are sitting together, Jews and non-Jews, people from the right, from the left, all of them fighting together. All of them are full of spirit, a spirit of unity, of camaraderie, of victory. At the beginning of the Hanukkah festival, we're going to talk about the heroism of the Maccabees then and today. Due to them and with the help of God, together we shall prevail. About 2 months ago, the war broke out. Hamas thought that the results will be different. It is getting beaten. It's losing control. And this is achieved because of a very determined and decisive action of the IDF soldiers from air, from sea, and from land. The results are very significant, impressive, precise. We are working with the peak of force. Every day I approve the plan and I meet the commanders in the field and I see the results. However, unfortunately, in war you have prices, and they are heavy, very heavy prices. Each of the fallen soldiers are dear people, beloved by their families, their friends, by us, as a nation, as a security system. Many of them I know personally. Many of them are commanders or sons of. I look at it and I pain, but I say to them, to the family members, to all of us, there's only one way to justify the sacrifice, and that is victory. And the victory has to be decisive, precise, accurate, and touches upon the objectives to hit the Hamas organization and to dismantle its capabilities, military and civil, and to bring back the hostages to their home. Yesterday as well, I was in the border of the Gaza Strip in the south, and I looked together with the commander of the area. We looked up close at the battles that are happening at the north. I see the process, I see the accuracy, I see the activity. And I know that the combatants are not leaving one tunnel alone, no location of production of weapons, no missile storage. They're acting there so that from that place they will not be able to act again. They eliminate it with all their means and possibilities, with accuracy, with force, with collaboration between the various branches, and because of their courage and determination, both theirs and the commanders. 5 days have ended since the maneuver started in its second stage. And I want to say to you that we went with great force from the north of the Strip to the south. What happened to the city of Gaza is now happening in Khan Yunis. These are very harsh blows with very impressive results. The terrorists of Hamas, they understand today very clearly, nobody is going to help them. Neither Iran nor the Hezbollah. They're only dependent on one thing, the strength of the IDF, and what happened in the north of the Strip will happen in the south. There will be not one battalion that will be able to be a real threat. We are going to dismantle them one after the other. Both the commanders, the sub-commanders, all the chain of command, all their control system, their storage of weapons, and all their arms. Recently, I'm being asked whether we have a legitimacy to continue. And I say we do not have a legitimacy to stop. There's only one legitimate thing, and that is to overcome the Hamas, to hit it, to liquidate it, and to stop it from ruling, to be a military force, and to bring back the hostages. I met hostages, the families, twice this week. I met with them today, also on Sunday. And the pain and the stories are really very, very harsh. And I say to the family members, and actually to some of the hostages who already came after they were released, and they met me in the last week, and I say to them, we are fully committed to bring back all the hostages, with no exception. The IDF creates the conditions in order to get to that. And we are doing everything possible, and we're going to do every effort possible in order to bring their release. We are enhancing the pressure in order to get to the achievement, and we're also making focal efforts that have to do with a lot of risk to the IDF soldiers in order to create intelligence and operative possibilities to bring about the release of additional hostages. Day and night, the soldiers from special units, together with the Shin Bet, are in every place where we can get to any results, and they're doing it in a very impressive way. I reiterate, there will be no possibilities where we will not make every effort possible in order to bring back the hostages home. This is our duty as a nation, as a state, as a security system, my own commitment as Minister of Defense. To conclude, let me clarify. We are fighting a just war, the most just. We are fighting a no-choice war because we don't end it with victory. Our life in this region is not going to be life. And therefore, we shall make every effort possible. We're going to mobilize the entire public. We're going to mobilize the IDF and bring about so that at the end of this war, the Hamas as an organization will stop existing in the Gaza Strip, no matter the effort. We are going to make it. Hello, everybody. We are continuing to expand the ground operation in Gaza. As we promised and we are proving, nothing is going to stop us. Some people thought that the Hamas will prevent the renewal of the war, and we prove that only Israel is going to determine its future. We are going to do whatever we have to everywhere, in the south and the north. And in order to do that, we shall listen to our friends and do what is right for the state of Israel. This war comes with a heavy price. I want to convey my condolences to the families of the fallen soldiers and to wish speedy recovery to the injured. Today we held a very complex, painful, and important meeting with the families of the hostages, including some of them who came back. We as a cabinet, we are committed to leave the door open 24/7 for these families, all of them. We are holding a great effort in order to release the hostages, a mission which needs the effort of a large team, of a whole country. And I would like to strengthen those who are dealing with it day and night, this very holy mission. First of all, the combatants who are sacrificing themselves, the families who are struggling in an inspiring way, the head of the Mossad, Alon, the head of the Shin Bet, the chief of staff, Gal Hirsch, all those who are involved with the connection with the families. The entire people of Israel relies on you and is proud of you. When I see those who came back who are themselves struggling for the others, I'm really amazed. Their mobilization is a lesson to the strength of the Israeli society and the essence of mutual responsibility. We are going to do everything possible in order to bring back the hostages. All of them are sons and daughters. There's no one hostage who is more important or less important than another. Our responsibility is to all of them, no exception. Every political or operational opportunity we shall take. 2 days before the festival of Hanukkah, where we talk about heroism, we're still again talking about supreme heroism of individuals and the society. A great light is coming out of so many people in our society. Two of these heroes who fell, Guy Simchi and Moshe Leiter of blessed memory, their fathers published a letter which must be a decree for all of us, and that's what they wrote. And I quote, "In the days where we are continuing to bury our dead, but we're still hitting with courage our despicable enemies, the days where we're enhancing our efforts to bring back the hostages, we must leave controversies aside and to act as one cohesive, united people." End of quote. So therefore, as a people, as citizens, we must have a fighting hand, but a building hand with our military and society strength. That's how we shall prevail. In our unity, the heroism of our combatants, and the leadership, we will overcome our enemies. I'd like to approach you, Prime Minister. Tomorrow you're going to pass the budget. In first hearing, the citizens of Israel understand the challenges of the war, also from the economic point of view, especially those people who were evacuated and the reservists. They're looking at us now at the moment. It's still not late to stop all these additional budgets that have nothing to do with the war and to transfer them and other resources for the needs of war. In such minutes, that's where the leadership is tested. In that as well as in other things that have to do with the war, we have to act from a comprehensive national consideration. Oded Yaron, who fought in the Yom Kippur War, wrote in a diary, and I quote, Yaron, "In my opinion, even if we prevail, life after this victory will be much more difficult than life before that. And I'm sure we shall win. Just like after Yom Kippur War, we shall learn and grow and strengthen. We are ready for the continuation of the war, and even after that, months and years of military operations. We have the determination, the patience, and we have the best people possible. Even if the victory will be difficult, we shall prevail. Even if building will be more difficult, we shall build. Just in the eve of the Hanukkah festival, we'll do everything that the light of the families of the hostages will come out of the windows and that people will celebrate so that the light of Israel will continue.
You're watching a live press conference, the Israeli War Cabinet addressing the nation. Cabinet member Benny Gantz, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and first up was Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm going to come straight to you, Owen, because the overriding message is those goals are still in place to eliminate Hamas and also a commitment to secure the release of all the hostages.
Yeah, but on this night, one goal is more equal than the others, right? One goal is more equal than the others, and that goal is fighting. That goal is winning the war, right? How did Yoav Gallant memorably put it? I'm asked if we have the legitimacy to keep fighting, and I asked, do we have the legitimacy? And I answer, we don't have the legitimacy to stop, right? That's the clear message delivered from all three of them, maybe a bit less so from Benny Gantz. We know from his own statements at past press conferences, he puts a bit more of a premium, or maybe significantly more of a premium, on bringing back the hostages than on winning the war. Of course, all within the scope of reasonable disagreements, as he has put it. But clearly, that one goal is more equal than the others. Certainly, we heard that from all three of them, from Netanyahu. In a sense, sidestepping a direct clash with the families, but nonetheless, one suspects not exactly a message that the families are going to be very excited to hear.
And that brings me to you, Danny Ayalon. If you are related to a hostage who is now being held captive still for more than 8 weeks, and you heard these three speeches, your thoughts would be what exactly?
No solace whatsoever. And quite frankly, there was no new news in this, the three speeches. No news about defining victory. It has all been set there. No news about development on the ground. No news about the day after, and certainly no news about the hostages. So for that matter, I think it was almost redundant, and certainly it will not make any peace in the hearts of not just the families of the hostages, but also not of Israelis either. At the end of the day, we also see the division, still political division in the war cabinet, when Gantz talked about, at the end, still appealing to Netanyahu to stop all those unnecessary funds to other issues and not to the war effort.
It was surprising, Owen, to hear mention of the budget from Benny Gantz at this juncture, especially when there has been such an effort for the three members of the war cabinet, despite their differences, to stand united when they do give these addresses to the nation.
Well, you're right. And not surprising in principle, right? Benny Gantz has obviously been very clear about how he feels about this budget, having, again, voted against it, and with his party voting against it inside the government, and then in the votes in the Israeli parliament, of course, that are still to come as well. But you're right. I think it was surprising to hear him use this stage at this hour to come out and say it. He obviously feels that it's appropriate, that it's part of the ambit of what a press conference like this is like, and obviously that he can get political traction out of it. I actually think the news here was in emphasizing that first goal and giving a kind of response to the families.
Well, let's take a listen to some of the questions at this press conference. We go back to hear what the war cabinet has to say.
I am so saddened about the events of October 7th, but I'm so proud of everything I see since then. I know the officers, since they were captains in the army, they were under my command in so many positions for decades. They're doing a wonderful job. I see the combatants in the field, and I'm sure the Minister Gallant can also testify to that. Excellent combatants doing a wonderful, dedicated, professional job. And there is a great pride to see them. And I'm saying to you, with all the pain and the disaster that happened, and it did happen, we have someone to rely on from a security point of view. As for the American sanctions, I, again, ask everybody, also for my American colleagues, not to use the concept of violence of settlers. It doesn't represent it, the state of Israel or the settlers of Judea and Samaria. 99% of these people are normative, law-abiding. There are settlements that 80% of the men are now in the front and protecting their homes in the north and the south. Unfortunately, there is a violence of radicals, of extremists. We have to condemn them in every way possible of the leadership, and we have to exert against them all their tools. And I suggest to our friends to be very careful. Who are they talking about? Another question. Which question do you want me to answer? Let me tell you, in a state of law, and Israel is a state of law, the authority to exert violence is given also only to people who were authorized by the government. The police, the Shin Bet, the army, nobody else has any authority to exert violence, neither small or big. And the talking that it relates it to some group that lives in Judea and Samaria is not a right one. We have a lot of injunctions, and I know that many people don't come from there. They come from other places. They don't live there. And that's why I want to say loud and clear, I'm against any activity of illegal elements. By the way, it happens all over the world. Many people take weapons and do things they shouldn't do, and you have to fight against it. We and our enemies have different goals and different values. We cannot behave like our enemies. They want to throw us out and kill us. We want security for our people, and therefore we cannot use the means and ways or the way they act, because we must restrain any violence which is illegal with every means possible, and we're going to do it. We don't need other people to explain to us. We are determined to do it anyway. This is our way. This is our duty. This is our country, and anybody who exerts violence, definitely shooting illegally, we have to stop him and deal with him. Yara Shapira, Prime Minister, senior person, minister in your government has to tell you about the budget, about what to do with the coalition budgets. You said it's not the time to talk about budgets. When is the time to talk about budgets? Would you like to answer the claims of Gantz, who said that this is lack of leadership? And another question, now it's 60 days to the war. How long can we say that the responsibility for the disaster will be dealt with only later on? And is it right that same people will continue to handle this war? Only two questions. That's it.
The Israeli War Cabinet taking questions there. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and War Cabinet member Benny Gantz. And still with me in studio, I want to pick up Danny Ayalon on Benjamin Netanyahu's interesting comment and appeal. He said, stand with us, stand with Israel, stand with civilization, slamming international organizations who hadn't been supportive, who hadn't been outraged at the awful atrocities, the graphic testimony and the images that have been emerging in the last 8 weeks.
Well, he's absolutely correct about it. I mean, shame on all these organizations, and especially the women organizations. You know, there was this Me Too phenomenon, which I think rightly so. You know, after so many years of abuse and actually quieting down and not letting women even a way to speak and express themselves, and there was always this tactic of not just self-doubting, but doubting the women. You have to prove. I mean, this is exactly what they are doing collectively to the entire Jewish people. Or, you know, if you are a Jewish woman, if you're an Israeli woman, we don't believe you. You have to prove it. And you have to go through the entire ugly campaign of proving that you've been abused, instead of really putting the focus on the abusers. And in that case, I think Netanyahu was right. Our mission at the UN is right about really raising and moving it up, putting it on the center of the international agenda, because it has to be a decisive condemnation, but not only that, but acting upon this, including trials for this abuse. It's crimes against humanity.
You know, I think viewers are lucky that they're watching I-24 News for this presser, because not only did you hear those snippets from Netanyahu in English that I'm sure will make it into sound bites in English language media around the world, but you heard just before that the translation from the Hebrew when he was talking about this. And remember, at least in the first case, real differences between the way he spoke in English and the way he spoke in Hebrew, right? In Hebrew, that jarring line, right? That essentially women don't matter unless they're Jewish women. Right, and we heard that in the translation. And then he goes to the more parve, the more cautious line in the English with the shame on you to the organization. So it was interesting, and I think in a way strange, that Netanyahu dialed back in the English version and wasn't willing to say in English with the same passion and with the same kind of jarring nature in terms of the way that he said it in Hebrew. You know, more broadly about this press, we talked about how the hostages' families were an audience here, and they clearly were, but I think there were two others. The second are soldiers' families. We lost 7 soldiers today. And given the nature of the fighting and what we're hearing about the fighting in Khan Yunis, it may be there are going to be other days when we lose similar numbers of soldiers.
81 Israeli soldiers killed so far in this ground operation.
Absolutely, and there are 300,000 who have been called up on reserve duty in addition to the standing military. Of course, not all of them are in the heart of Khan Yunis, but many are. And so obviously many families are very, very worried about their loved ones who are there. Again, whether in the standing army or in reservists who are fighting there. And I think a warning from the War Cabinet about what we can expect to those families. So also not great news for them, although everyone understands the risks that their loved ones are courageously taking on. And of course, the third audience was the Biden administration, where Israel is doing just about everything that Antony Blinken said not to do, right? The war in the South looks exactly like the war in the North. That was what Israel was asked not to do. Civilians have been told to move from eastern Khan Yunis, something Israel was told not to do. Humanitarian aid is coming in by fits and starts, but it's not coming in the way Antony Blinken wanted. So another thing Israel's doing that was not what the Biden administration wants to do, they've held back in their criticisms so far. One wonders what's behind that, and one wonders how that will develop in the days to come.
And something we certainly will be watching in the coming days and weeks and months, no doubt. Owen Alterman, Danny Ayalon, thank you both so much for being here for this breaking news edition. And that message from Benjamin Netanyahu, he's expecting all civilized nations to speak up. And here's why, because Israeli hostages released from captivity in Gaza have been recounting harrowing experiences of abuse and psychological terror. As we've been saying, there are still 138 hostages, young and old, being held in dire conditions. More in this next report.
Is everything okay? My mother was kept in a 1.5-room apartment. She was in one small closed room, and the couple lived in the other. There was a small window in the room, which they closed, and she couldn't see if it was day or night. As soon as she realized she was alone, she simply told us, "Listen, I decided, I read, I studied all the stories from the Holocaust. I will keep a diary. I read that Gilad Shalit used to do some sports, and that's what kept her going." She realized very quickly that they prayed 5 times a day, and she would simply count prayers. She would record it in a journal, and the prayers and sound of the muazzin, all these things gave her a complex of understanding what day it was, what night, what hour, and she revolved around that.
When I come to them, they see the distress. You see the distress. Yola, Yael, all the time by their mother's side. She never leaves Adi. Until 2 days ago, she whispered. She didn't speak at all, not out loud. Now there a little more, but you know, he's well aware from the moment they were kidnapped what happened. He saw everything. He doesn't speak at all. Not asking. Not about the father, not about the grandfather. As far as we know, all 6 of them were in one place. Tal was not with them, no.
We saw some of the children who came with orthopedic injuries. There is a girl who needed surgery. Injuries to the legs, injuries to the hands, scars that were on children, a burn on a child's leg, which he said was a burn from a motorcycle. We saw very low hygiene conditions, at levels I don't remember encountering on children. Stories you hear from other areas, lice, rashes, skin infections.
Some of them lost weight in a very, very significant way. What does that mean? 10 kilos in children, a lot. They arrived, and after the first meeting with the family, what is the first thing they want to give children who meet them? We let them eat, and at some point we found ourselves taking food from the children's rooms so that they wouldn't eat too much when they arrived. That's why I pulled yogurts and rolls out of the children's hands so that it wouldn't be too much.
We will have to continue to support them and give them everything they need, both now and in the future. But they are amazing. We've received an inspiring group of children.
We know that she did not know, for example, what happened to her father. She was very pleasantly surprised to see her father in that famous video, that she actually ran quickly, at the speed of light, into her mother's embrace, and suddenly she saw her father, and she was sure that her father had been kidnapped. She did not know that her father was saved and got out of it. The first thing she asked, after looking around her and suddenly didn't see Lior, her brother, she asked about her brother, and the parents had to tell her. This is actually the first thing they told her after she returned, about her brother, that her brother was murdered. From what I know, and this is almost the first thing I heard from her when I saw her, this whole time she was without shoes. For almost 2 months, this girl was without shoes.
She says that she was humiliated very much, that she had a very difficult experience, that she was treated badly, and this is now engraved in her heart. Everything she does, she remembers the experience from there.
Was she there alone?
She's very scared for the abductees who remained behind.
They're still in danger.
She was literally brainwashed there, really, and she doesn't live in our world right now. She's still there.
It's impossible to cope there. It's impossible. We have to get the abductees out of there. If we don't get them out now, they won't get out alive.
How did she keep her sanity? What did she do all day?
She says that most of the time she just looked at the wall. That's what she had to do, and only occupied herself with thoughts of, my daughters are fine, my daughters are fine, my daughters are fine, my daughters are fine. She kept trying to convince herself.
Are there things that we don't see, but you can say that something has changed?
Her enthusiasm for every little thing, from the most basic thing she had before, I don't know, maybe a towel for the shower or some chocolate or something to drink, you suddenly see the light in her eyes, that she accepts such things. Or used to. She was always, we'd waste our dinner, throw away food as usual. Today we're forbidden to throw away food. There's no such thing. Save everything, put it in the fridge, find a place.
זכינו לטפל ב-29 שבים עכשיו בשבה ה-30.
We were privileged to take care of 29 returnees, now the 30th returnee, almost all of them without exception. The first thing they wanted to do when they met their families was to talk. We heard a lot from them about the psychological games that were played with them as part of the psychological abuse they went through. So it's also related to information that they share and don't share.
אז גם הוא היה גם קשור לידיעות ולמידע.
As part of the psychology of the captive, of creating dependence on the captives. But by my feeling, from what I hear from the people, is that it has been refined at very high levels.
What do you mean, elaborate psychological terror?
The feeling is that it was sophisticated, not random or unplanned, orchestrated, not some kind of relationship that develops by chance between a certain captor and a certain abductee, but to create the psychological infrastructure to play on their minds in a way that would achieve their goal.
Was there also evidence of abuse?
Yes. But I won't go into details. As I said, I can say it's about the whole range of abuse that a person can dream of. And when I hear some of the returnees who just want to talk, and I found myself sitting by their bedsides for hours and listening to their stories, it's no different from testimonies of people who survived the ghettos or concentration camps. It sounds the same. I think we can't sleep at night because of those who have returned and the stories that they have to tell. And I say again, it will take time for it to come out. And we still have a lot of people there who are being held in bad conditions. And as the days go by, they're still there.
Truly unimaginable. And that's where we wrap up this breaking news edition. 138 hostages remain in captivity in Gaza at this hour. Our rolling coverage continues. Yoav Limor and the Strictly Security team is up next. I'm Benita Levine. Thank you for watching. And we leave you with these images of 5-year-old Emilia Aloni going back to kindergarten in Israel. Emilia was one of the youngest hostages held by Hamas terrorists for more than 7 weeks in Gaza. Look at these images, look at these hugs. Thanks for watching.
Made for Me, a unique concept in Israel. Custom-made men's fashion to your measurements. Made for Me, designer of all your events. Schedule your appointment at www.madeforme.co.il. Made for Me, official dresser of I-24 News.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Israel is at war. Make an investment in Israel bonds. It is the most powerful and direct way to stand with Israel. Visit israelbonds.com and invest now.
Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front line, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
מניח את האקדח על הרצפה. אז מסתבר שאז כן יורים ורוצחים.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24 únicamente en i24 News.
Hello, good evening. I'm Yoav Limor, and this is a special edition of Strictly Security coming to you live from the Jaffa port. Day 60 of the war in Gaza, heavy barrages of rockets to Israel's south center and north today, direct hit in the southern city of Ashkelon as the IDF's battle over Hamas's stronghold of Khan Yunis is gaining momentum. We'll speak about the role of the armored corps and its significance in the ground maneuver, and speak about the trophy active protection system, making sure our tanks and the soldiers in them are safe and sound. A delegation of the White House officials is set to arrive in Israel on Monday to discuss the day after the war on Hamas in Gaza. We'll speak about various options and plans for Gaza once the war ends. Who will take charge of the war-torn strip, and what are the possible scenarios? All of that and more coming right up. Let's begin. We begin with the latest updates. Our correspondent Zach Anders is at the northern border. Zach, fighting has resumed in the last few days today, mainly in the city of Kiryat Shmona. Give us the update to this hour.
It has been a series of low-grade burns that happen every single day here, with strikes that take place. Many of them come close to homes and roads filled with traffic, but they continue to fall in open areas like today's, where we saw rocket launches targeting Kiryat Shmona that, again, because thousands of people have evacuated, fell into the middle of a roadway in one area, and luckily no one was hurt. There was a playground right across the road from where the bits of the rocket fell, and of course late at night. So the circumstances here, it's just all timing, and it continues to be remarkable to see the level of fighting that is taking place here on the northern border as Hezbollah attempts to target not only the IDF positions, but civilian areas as well, these towns. Hezbollah today taking credit for 5 different launches. There were more that were counted and more red alarms throughout the day, but at least from what Hezbollah is claiming through Lebanese media channel, they're taking credit for 5 of these launches. No apparent injuries today, and that is the important part.
Zach, thanks so much for this report. Keep safe. On day 60 of the Gaza war, a ground operation in the southern Gaza Strip is undergo mainly in the city of Khan Younis, while the IDF is still fighting in the northern part as well. I24 News senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev with the details.
Fighting is raging all across the Gaza Strip as Hamas strongholds are being targeted one after the other. One of those is Jabalia, just to the north of Gaza City. It is a very densely populated area where terrorists can pop up from a tunnel shaft practically anywhere. IDF forces, striking from the ground and from the air, have now encircled Jabalia, one of the last standing strongholds in the northern Gaza Strip, and are now carrying out the dangerous mission of clearing this area of terrorists to further establish Israeli control here.
There should be no stopping. Keep on pushing forward until victory here, and you should know that the next missions are already planned.
This is the next mission. Khan Younis is the biggest city in the southern Gaza Strip. This is the birthplace of Yahya Sinwar and Muhammad Def, the political and military leaders of Hamas in Gaza. This is also the place Israel believes many of the hostages are being held. There's been no ground incursion here yet, but the very heavy artillery and airstrikes suggest that it is coming.
We pursued them in northern Gaza. We're now pursuing Hamas in southern Gaza too. We will operate in maximum force against Hamas terrorists and infrastructures while minimizing harm to the civilian that Hamas places around them as shields.
It will be a difficult challenge as the vast majority of the Gaza Strip population, more than 2 million people, is concentrated in this area. While Israel is trying to protect them, Hamas has no problem, or maybe even an interest, in sacrificing them all.
Now on to the southern front. Israel joins us now from the city of Ashdod. Guy, sum up this day for us, please.
So, as Jonathan Regev reported there, the IDF operation in Gaza continues in full force. The IDF saying yesterday was the most intense day since the start of the fighting, as the IDF continues to eliminate Hamas in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, mainly in the neighborhoods of Sajaiya and the town of Jabalia. But as the confirmation was received today, IDF forces are also operating in the major city of Khan Younis in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. Minister Benny Gantz a short while ago saying we will operate wherever is needed in order to eliminate Hamas. That, of course, in accordance with the goals of Israel of eliminating Hamas's military capabilities in Gaza. But as this fight is ongoing, so is the rocket fire today across many areas in Israel, in Beersheba, in Tel Aviv, and also in Ashkelon and Ashdod, where we are today. Earlier in Ashkelon, a direct hit into a building, a residential building. A mother and her 2 children were able to find refuge in the shelter there, miraculously saving their lives. 2 other women were lightly wounded from shrapnel in that incident. Hamas is definitely attempting to show that it still has the ability to launch rockets, while the IDF is operating in many areas across the Gaza Strip. And obviously that pause in the fighting of the week-long pause during the hostage release deal, that certainly gave Hamas a lot of breathing time. The breathing air was able to regroup, to rearm, and reset itself. So it is no wonder it is able to launch rockets that wouldn't deter the IDF from continuing to eliminate Hamas in all parts of Gaza, and we still are expecting quite a long battle ahead, to say the least.
Guy, let's speak a bit about the civil front. You're in Ashdod, but the closer cities to the Gaza Strip, mainly Sderot, Ashkelon, do we see residents, civilians over there coming back to their homes after 2 months?
Yeah, a major difference between these two cities. Of course, the city of Sderot, together with the rest of the communities that are closest to the border, well, they were all evacuated by the state. They all were given alternative accommodation in hotels in Tel Aviv, in Eilat, in the Dead Sea. So most of these residents certainly have left, although I have to say there are some exceptions. I was in the kibbutz of Mefalsim on Friday, and surprisingly, not only the emergency team was there, but also some stubborn residents who decided to stay regardless of the rocket fire, and that is an imminent threat there. That is not the case for Ashkelon, obviously the biggest city closest to the border. Most of the residents were not given a chance to evacuate by the state, and unfortunately they have to remain there under that threat of rockets. Same goes for Ashdod, and you know, Israel is a small country. It doesn't take more than an additional 10 kilometers to get from Ashkelon to Ashdod, another 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers to Tel Aviv. It's all very small distances. So if you evacuate from Ashkelon to Ashdod or even to Tel Aviv, obviously the rockets reach there as well, as we saw very well. For the city of Ashkelon, we saw quite a lot of movement there. Residents who fled on their own at the start of the war have started to come back. Life is sort of back to normal. Of course, that's not the case when it comes to schools and some workplaces, but people at the end of the day do not have anywhere else to go to. That is the situation in Ashkelon, very different from Sderot, who is literally a ghost town these days.
Guy, thank you so much. Keep safe. Thanks for this report. The day after has yet to dawn on Gaza, but speculations has been on for weeks about what that sunrise might bring. Senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alterman gives us a quick outline of the possible directions.
Before the day after in Gaza, the day itself has to end. But if the war in fact drives Hamas out of power, then 3 different types of regime could rule the Strip.
We have said that any security responsibility that they take on because of the military operation in Gaza needs to be temporary.
The first, reoccupation by Israel, with Israel governing 2 million Gazans, seen by almost all as a bad outcome, but still the default. If the war ends with Israel in control, then Israel would need to find a taker to replace it. Fail to find someone, and Israel would be stuck.
In defining that future, in shaping that future for Gaza, for the West Bank, and ultimately for a Palestinian state, Palestinian voices have to be at the center of that.
And so the second option, Palestinians governing Gaza. Either the Palestinian Authority, a revitalized Palestinian Authority, or some other structure run by Palestinians. In Washington and beyond, seen as the better choice. A skeptical Israel will try for deep change in Palestinian education and policies toward terrorism.
We will do everything to ensure that Gaza does not return to pose a threat to Israel, and that there is no element in it that educates its children in terrorism.
And then the third option, an international force, enticing, say, Saudi Arabia or the UAE to take on influence in Gaza, to show goodwill to the Arab world, and to project power against Iran. The outside actor could work through a Palestinian Authority it sponsors, showing options can be mixed and matched to find something key players can rally around.
Yes, and now I'd like to welcome our guest for this part of the show, Dr. Adi Schwartz, research fellow at the Misgav Institute here in Israel, and in Washington, D.C., Clifford May, founder and president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. Thank you both for joining us tonight. So, Adi, let's start from the Israeli point of view. What does Jerusalem want? Because Prime Minister Netanyahu says no to Hamas, no to the PA, Palestinian Authority, and no to an Israeli control over the Gaza Strip. So yes to what?
So first of all, good evening, and thanks for having me. I think it should be, or it would be, some kind of a mix of options 2 and 3 that your correspondent just mentioned. I don't think that PA would be allowed, as the Prime Minister just said even a few minutes ago, but some kind of a local Palestinian leadership that might be, for example, the mayors of the different cities of the Gaza Strip, or some kind of a Palestinian leadership that would run civilian or daily life, such as taxes and sewage and education, etc. And I do believe also that there would be some kind of Arab auspices, such as Saudi Arabia, UAE, definitely not Qatar, perhaps Egypt, the more moderate Arab countries. I think a mix of these two, local Palestinian leadership and an umbrella perhaps of Arab countries, but all this time, possibility for Israeli security forces to prepare counterterrorism attacks and whatever it needs to control the security.
Yes, Clifford May, thanks for joining us from Washington, D.C. How does it look from the other side of the Atlantic?
Well, I agree with what I've just heard. I would just say that as a matter of international law and as a matter of procedure, this is not Israel's primary responsibility. I think it's good that there are Israelis who are thinking about this and looking towards the future. But Israel's responsibility right now, there are still 138 hostages. Hamas is still launching rockets. Hamas is still trying to jump out of tunnels and kill Israeli soldiers. Israel's primary responsibility is the defense of its civilians, and its primary responsibility is to achieve its war aims. I think that we all have to understand that means stripping Hamas of any military capabilities and of any governing capabilities. Now, after that, it's complex, and it's good that people are thinking about it. Yes, there may be local mayors who can do a lot. There may be technocrats. There may be people like Salim Fayyad, who was once prime minister, who is living in the United States now as a professor, who was a very good who was somebody who wanted to build the foundations of a nation state when he was in part of the Palestinian Authority. Maybe they can be brought in. I think the U.S. may want to organize a kind of coalition of the willing and a coalition of goodwill that might include Saudi Arabia, might include Egypt, might include Jordan, might include the United Arab Emirates, should not include Qatar. To see what can be done so that you could have a period of reconstruction in Gaza. That's going to be necessary. And the Israelis will have security responsibilities until such time as there are no terrorist organizations posing a threat to Israelis. I think that has to be understood by everybody, and I would hope it's understood in the administration here in the United States. I think plenty of people do, and I think others are going to, like myself, will make that case.
Yes, but Mr. May, you've started by eliminating Hamas's ruling, governing capabilities and its military capabilities. That takes time. That might take a lot of time. Weeks. Israel speaks of months. People in Israel speak about a year. You hear the administration. You've seen, the administration's senior officials arriving at Israel, both mainly Secretary of State, but we've heard Secretary of Defense as well, and practically saying to Israel, you don't have that time.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because if the Israelis are forced to rush, that's going to mean more death and destruction, not less death and destruction. I would give the Israelis the time they need. Now, how much time will that take? Well, those who care about the people of Gaza should be telling Hamas to surrender, to give up its weapons, to give up its hostages, to come out waving little white flags, and then this could all be over very quickly, long before Hamas runs out of weapons and runs out of rockets and runs out of ammunition. We have Hamas leaders living in Doha, Qatar, right now. Qatar is, in theory, and more than theory, a major ally of the U.S. The U.S. should be telling Qatar to tell those Hamas leaders, should tell their commanders, it's over. We want to save the people of Gaza. It's time to lay down your weapons immediately. And that should be said throughout the Arab world, and that should be said by the UN, and it should be said by the Europeans. If that's not the case, then these people are allowing Hamas to use average Gazans as sacrificial pawns. That's wrong. In the meantime, the Israelis have to do what is necessary. Eventually, the Hamas will run out of weapons. What will they do at that point? Eventually, the Israelis will find all the hundreds of entrances and exits to the various tunnels that have been built with foreign aid assistance and foreign material that has been stolen by Hamas from the people of Gaza. But that will take time. But at the end of the day, Hamas, after what it did on 10/7, what it's doing right now with the hostages, Hamas cannot have any military capabilities whatsoever. I think Israelis understand that pretty widely. I would hope people in the U.S. and Europe understand that as well. It's certainly the case I want to make.
Yes, Dr. Schwartz, back to you. You know, we've heard Clifford May advocating Israel's case better than any of our leaders, I think. But is it that easy? I mean, you see the circumstances on the ground. You see the humanitarian problem, which is growing bigger. You see the Arab pressure, which is growing bigger. And obviously, you see the Western pressure, which is growing bigger. So, on the contrary, you have the domestic arena, which supports that war maybe 100% because of the refugee, of the hostage problem, because of the practical problem of if Hamas stays there, we've done nothing. So how do you balance between all those pressures and at the end of the day come up with the upper hand?
Well, I think the most important factor here would be leadership. I mean, if the Israeli leadership decides to stick to what we've been hearing for 2 months, that the target of this operation is, first of all, to wipe out Hamas or take out their capabilities, military and governmental capabilities, and freeing the hostages, then Israeli leadership should stick to these targets. And I think that if Israeli leadership would show strength, both domestically and internationally, that could be possible. But I would like to point out another problem, which I see further down the road, and that is for the day after, as we speak about that, is that there's some kind of a superficial and even artificial differentiation between Gaza and Hamas. There's this notion that once we take out Hamas, then everything will be okay. I don't think so. I think that Hamas is very well embedded in the Palestinian population of Gaza. We can remember that they were elected. We know that even today, if we do elections in the West Bank, which hasn't suffered the same as the population of Gaza, then Hamas would probably win. So our problem is much bigger than the problem of Hamas. Our problem is with the people of Gaza and actually with the entire Palestinian population, which is still holding a rejectionist view towards the state of Israel, still rejects the notion of the existence of the state of Israel. And therefore, I think that when people talk about the day after, they have to talk about de-radicalizing the entire population. I think that the examples given in the World War II, what happened with the Nazi Germany after the war, or perhaps with Japan, I think a complete reorientation of this population, of this society, has to be done. If we really want that 7th of October will not repeat itself, and it's much more than just wiping out Hamas in terms of military and governmental capabilities, will have to be, and I think this should be a worldwide campaign. Israel would not be able to do that alone. We need the United States, we need Arab moderate states, we need the European Union to really reconfigure the Palestinian society to be able to live side by side with the state of Israel, next to Israel, and not instead of the state of Israel. So I think actually that the day after is a bigger challenge than the military challenge that we're facing right now.
Yes, Dr. Schwartz, I want to tackle with you another point, which is the UNRWA point, that UN infrastructure which was founded to deal with the refugees, but now we're facing 5th, 7th, 8th generation of refugees, many of them not refugees anymore, and this organization has long been kidnapped by Hamas, used by Hamas for on its money and infrastructure and everything for Hamas's needs. Is there a place in Gaza for UNRWA in the future after that war? And if not, as you've been speaking beforehand quite often, who will come and do that job?
You're absolutely right. I think that in the history of the last 75 years, there hasn't been a more catastrophic organization or a phenomenon which is worse than UNRWA. UNRWA has perpetuated the Palestinian refugee problem. Without UNRWA, I think that already in the 50s, we would not have refugees. They should not have been considered refugees from the first place, but that's beside the point. And to your question, I definitely think that Israel should say that the day after does not include UNRWA. Now, to your question, how can we do it? So if the United States or the European Union or Japan or whomever wants to help in the reconstruction of Gaza, then they can do it like they do in many other places. For example, the United States has USAID, which is the development and aid agency. And there's no need for the problem with UNRWA is the political aspect and that they're giving out refugee cards. So, for example, if there's an earthquake in Haiti or in Turkey, many countries in the world simply send help. They don't designate half the population of Turkey as refugees. Well, this is what happened in Gaza. Right now, 75% of the population of Gaza are considered by the United Nations to be refugees. This means that 75% of the population of Gaza consider themselves to be, coming from somewhere else. Where is that somewhere else? We don't know. It's Ashkelon, it's Beersheba, and they continue to dream about how they return to these places. This, of course, is detrimental to the relationship with Israel. It is contradictory to the idea of ever reaching peaceful resolution of the conflict. So what I'm saying is that in the day after, everybody who wants to help, either you create a new agency or you simply work with USAID and other agencies, which, by the way, operate in the Gaza Strip. So you don't have to do something very special. They already operate in the Gaza Strip.
Yes. Clifford, I want to sum up with you and ask you how deep the U.S. is ready to be involved, because, usually we've seen the Americans in last couple of decades getting involved in Iraq and getting involved in Afghanistan and then trying to leave. So can Israel build not on a militarily involvement in Gaza, but on a practical involvement which will assist us and others to change the situation?
I don't think either Americans or Israelis should have a primary role in the reconstruction of Gaza and attempts to change the ideology or theology that prevails in Gaza. I think that's a responsibility for the pragmatic Arab countries to undertake with whatever support America and Israel can give them. Whoever leads in Gaza can believe whatever they want, but what they have to understand is that peaceful coexistence, they don't have to believe in peaceful coexistence. They have to understand that there is no good alternative to peaceful coexistence, because if there is not peaceful coexistence, there will be hostilities, and those hostilities will cause great additional suffering to the people of Gaza. And anybody who is in control of Gaza should not want that. Anybody who is trying to build buildings back, to get kids back into school, I think UNRWA has been a very damaging influence. I think the UN in general has been a damaging influence. So all of this needs to be rethought. The U.S. can be helpful there. The U.S. provides about 25%, probably more, of the funds that support the UN. Things will need to change if Gaza is going to be built back better. and if its cities are, and if Gaza is not going to be rubbled again, and that is the choice of the people of Gaza and those who are put in control there.
Yes.
Elections are probably a long way off. That's too bad. But there haven't been elections for a long while in Gaza or the West Bank.
I want to thank you for that, Adi Schwartz. I want to thank you as well. A quick break for commercials, and when we return, the man in the tank will prevail. We'll speak about the role of the armored corps in Gaza. When we return, don't go anywhere.
Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front lines, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Goldberg Pauline.
Romy Gonen.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra, Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en i24 News.
You're watching Strictly Security Live. Thank you for staying with us. Tanks have played a key role in the ongoing war against Hamas, more so than in any previous operation in Gaza. i24 News met with the commander of the armored corps in southern Israel and spoke to him about the war thus far and the preparation for the battles to come. More in this next report.
From these winter-proof tents, near the city of Beersheba in the Negev desert, the Israeli army's armored corps leads its fierce battle in the Gaza Strip. And from here, strategic plans are issued for the forces in the field. The high-ranking officer of the armored corps is taking advantage of this truce to inspect the headquarters. He came here to ensure that lessons were learned and that his soldiers' performance in the field can be improved when the fighting is renewed.
It is the Armored Corps' finest hour. The Israeli people see this war as an Armored Corps war. The advances in Gaza and much of the work there is being done by the Armored Corps.
Unlike previous rounds of escalation in Gaza, where armored forces were more sparingly used, the Israeli army has assigned them a major role in this war, realizing that relying solely on air support is not sufficient. The high-ranking officer of the armored vehicles lists what he considers the war's achievements so far: the elimination of Hamas terrorists in battle, and the destruction of terror and weapon facilities in the heart of Gaza City.
Everything we see in Hamas videos about the destruction of tanks is inaccurate and distorts the truth. I'm not saying that they don't fire or hit the tanks, but they hit certain parts of the tanks that we can allow them to hit. Our tanks have been fortified, and since the beginning of the fighting, not a single tank has been destroyed. Tanks have taken damage, but all of them were serviceable.
Not a single tank has been destroyed?
No. I tell you again, there must be a distinction between damage to the tank and destruction of the tank. They claim they destroy tanks, but I tell you, there is not a single tank that was damaged and did not return to service within a few hours, and was soon back in combat.
The Israeli army attributes the relatively small losses to advanced technology, the 360 range of vision, made possible by the new smart helmets in the tanks, and to the system that destroys anti-tank missiles before they hit the target. But it also attributes it to infantry raids prior to armored forces' arrival that have eliminated Hamas anti-armor units. A conversation with brigade and battalion commanders conducted by Hisham Ibrahim, who participated in the invasion of Lebanon in 2006, did not leave the generational gap in Israeli society unmentioned.
Maybe we should be satisfied with this generation. We doubted their abilities a little. We described them as the screen generation and said they couldn't take it. Listen, they fight like heroes. They lived up to the expectations and were victorious in every situation they were put in.
Israel has already plans to flood Hamas's system of tunnels under the Gaza Strip with water pumped from the Mediterranean Sea. The Wall Street Journal reports, citing U.S. officials, the report says the IDF set up last month 5 large water pumps near the Shati camp in the Gaza City, which are capable of flooding the subterranean network within weeks by pumping thousands of cubic meters of water per hour into the tunnels, while Israel alerted the U.S. about the plan last month, but has not yet decided on whether to implement it. Middle East correspondent Ariel Osseran has more.
An unusual plan to tackle a serious threat. The Wall Street Journal reported late Monday that Israel finished assembling a system of large pumps to flood Hamas's vast underground tunnel network with seawater. According to the report, the IDF set up 5 large water pumps near the Shati camp in northern Gaza, capable of flooding the terror tunnels under the strip.
When we talk about the tunnel system, we have to understand that there are 2 aspects to it. There's the vertical aspect, which is the shafts, of which there are hundreds and hundreds. 800 have already been found, 500 have been destroyed. And they present a tactical threat to any Israeli forces operating in Gaza. But there's the other aspect of it, and that's the 500 kilometers of underground tunnels. I call that the horizontal part of it, which not only are networked under the cities, but connect the cities to each other.
The goal of the weeks-long process would be to gradually flush out Hamas terrorists and potentially hostages from the tunnels, with the aim to render them unusable.
It's one of many methods to destroy the tunnels, and it's a great important to the Israeli military to destroy the tunnels, because this is the way that the Hamas is trying to survive this war, and afterward, of course, to claim that he is victorious.
In other words, the destruction caused by the IDF above ground would force the international community to impose a ceasefire, with Hamas protected from Israeli strikes. Israel reportedly informed the U.S. of the option early last month, prompting a discussion in Washington regarding its costs and benefits.
There are 2 downsides that one is for sure, and the other one is a we don't know. The one for sure is damaging the aquifer under Gaza. In other words, there's an environmental question here that has to come into play. But even leaving that aside, the substrate of Gaza is sand, as you can see in what you're showing on the screen right now, sand absorbs water, and it's not clear at all whether these tunnels will actually flood, even with massive amounts of water being pumped into them. They may get a foot or two of water, on the ground, but will they actually flood to the point where they can't be used is an open question.
The idea of flooding tunnels in Gaza is not new. Back in 2015, Egypt flooded hundreds of underground tunnels between Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula, used for smuggling and by Islamist groups.
The Egyptians destroyed everything within 20 days. The flooding of the tunnels caused them more damage than 50 days of Israeli airstrikes. All the tunnels have collapsed.
While some of the hundreds of tunnels did survive the flooding, the benefit of such a strategy seemed clear. Now the question is whether the leaked information is intended to only frighten Hamas, or is indeed Israel's next move in its campaign to uproot Hamas from beneath the ground.
And now I'd like to welcome Reserve Major General Gershon Cohen, former commander of the 7th Armored Division, and Major Doron Spielman, IDF spokesman to the international media. Thank you so much both for joining me this evening. So Gershon, I'll start with you. We see the performance of the Armored Corps within the Gaza Strip after, a long dispute within the Israeli public whether, they're capable of doing so or incapable of doing so. And, I witnessing it myself. They're operating quite impressively. But personally, as an expert, are you surprised?
No, I'm not surprised. I was trusting the necessity of the whole armor units just due to what we can learn from the lesson in Ukrainian warfare. At the beginning of Ukrainian warfare, a lot of tanks just burned in the way to Kiev. Brought a lot of experts to say this is the end of tanks in the history of warfare. But as long as the war just continued in the effort of the Ukrainian to go to an offensive, counteroffensive in the last summer, they found the necessity of armor units with Leopard tanks. It means that war could be managed by fire against fire. In that occasion, tanks are not really necessary. But at the moment, one military side trying to transform to offensive, to change the situation, to get momentum, we cannot do that without armor. And it happened to be confirmed again in Gaza. No way to do that war in Gaza without armor units.
And furthermore, Gershon Cohen, you say we cannot operate over there without armored units, but we've seen several hits in tanks and in other vehicles, and such a hit, claims quite a large amount of casualties. So balancing between the two is quite complicated.
Yes, in a way we can just say that nothing is really an absolute promise for protection. Even in 67 victory, we lost a lot of armor crew. I myself joined the armor after 73 war. In the war itself, I was infantry, but due to a lot of casualties among the crews of armor, they called a lot of infantry to join the armor. And the victory in 73 was not really achieved without tanks and the dedication of armor crews to go ahead. Much more than that. If we are just learning what happened in 73 war, we are taking the paratrooper brigade in what was called the Chinese farm. They engaged in a very intensive battle for 2 days, and that was, in a way, the main contribution of them. Armor units participated in the war from the beginning to the end in more than 21 days without any break. This could be done only by armor units. So from time to time, we are suffering losses of people, of soldiers, but we must compare it to other wars. For example, the Ukrainian, in one day in the last summer, they lost 40 tanks in an offensive and hundreds of soldiers.
Yes.
We are in a different situation.
Yes, Major Spielman, thanks again for joining us this evening. So looking at the operation, you know, Israel has operated in the past few weeks in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and currently since yesterday in the southern part, aiming at achieving what exactly?
Really the same aim, Joel, that we set out to from the very beginning, which began on October 7th when Hamas attacked Israel. Many of those Hamas terrorists came from Khan Yunis, which is one of the major terrorist strongholds in the southern Gaza Strip. They attacked the border communities. They were one of the key Nukba forces that wreaked such havoc, murder, and annihilation of our people. And then they retreated back into Khan Yunis, where there's a pre-built terror infrastructure. You're talking hundreds of tunnels, massive weapon supplies. They are dug in deep underneath the ground, very embedded in the civilian population. This has to be one of the most difficult urban warfare settings probably in the world. But if we want to be able to eliminate Hamas and prevent October 7th from happening ever again, that is where we're engaging with the terrorists. And we can see today, as the Major General spoke about, you're talking about armored corps, combination with armored corps, infantry and aerial support, intelligence, special forces, and engineering corps. We have these combined forces that operate as a single unit. And when you put them together and they synchronize, it's a very effective force at finding an enemy and eliminating an enemy, and also aids us in trying to be more precise, thereby limiting the civilian casualties amongst the Gazan people.
Yes, Doron, staying with you, what do you answer to those who claim that Israel causes a humanitarian disaster in the southern Gaza area?
Look, the situation in Gaza in general is not a situation that any of us wanted to see. None of us woke up on October 6th and thought that we would be sending our sons and daughters into Gaza to fight. Certainly not that we would have 250 hostages in Gaza, 138, including women and children and men, remain in Gaza. None of us woke up and had this idea, but I think we can all agree that in order to prevent that from happening again, we have to defeat Hamas wherever Hamas is located. And the issue is, of course, we know our responsibility. Our responsibility is to protect the Israeli people and destroy Hamas and minimize Gazan civilian casualties. The question here is, what is Hamas's responsibility? They are taking these Gazan people, they are using them as human shields. Everywhere that we engage with Hamas, there are civilians. And therefore, we have to make a decision. The world has to make a decision. Do they want to spend their energy blaming Israel, or do they want to spend their energy helping the Gazan people? If they want to help the Gazan people and the humanitarian issue, the only way to ultimately deal with that is to put pressure on Hamas, which are holding those people and pushing them in the line of fire and demanding that they release those people, go into open areas, have a little bit of courage, which they haven't shown now, and fight the IDF face to face. If they manage to do that, then the humanitarian situation in Gaza will be taken care of.
Yeah, you know, that won't happen, unfortunately. In Israel, the IDF will have to fight tunnel to tunnel, house to house, in order to beat Hamas. Major Doron Spielman, Reserve Major General Gershon Cohen, thank you, gentlemen, so much for talking to us this evening.
Thank you, and we are just wishing to see the victory and then to
hopefully
explore it and bring lessons.
Gershon, thank you so much once again. A big part of the armored success corners from the advanced technology protecting IDF tanks in the field. One key factor in this success story is the Trophy Active Protection System developed by Rafael. We spoke with one of the executives there about operational performance and the international market for this life-saving system. Let's watch.
Dan Kalfus, Managing Director, Eurotrophy at Rafael Advanced Systems. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So we're seeing your systems being deployed heavily in Gaza in the current operation, current war. Share with us some thoughts, details that you get from inside.
Yeah, well, you can see Trophy is being deployed right now in great numbers. There's many platforms inside, many armored vehicles, both main battle tanks, like the Merkava and also the Namera APC, getting in the open terrain, a very packed terrain, very dangerous, with a lot of anti-tank ambushes. And so far we've seen the system is proven itself, as it has done in the past, both with close range threats and with enabling actually the maneuver inside the strip. I think this is the main thing which is important now, which I would like to address now, is the maneuverability of the tanks and the APCs inside the open terrain. And this is one of the key capabilities Trophy grants you.
Furthermore, then, there have been many thoughts with your system of Trophy is coping better than expected.
Well, I won't say better than expected situations. And besides being able to protect the platforms and the troops inside of them, in addition to that, there's also protecting the mission. And here the mission is to maneuver in order to deprive the enemy of its capabilities. This is what exactly we are doing with Trophy. This is a key capability we are granting the troops in the field. And you talked about RPGs and cornets. These are some of the threats we are handling, and we are seeing these threats all around the world, not just now with the IDF. And we are really able to cope with that.
We'll touch the global markets and the global wars in a second, but staying in the Gaza Strip, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Trophy system was deployed 2009 or so, and first kill was 2011, if I'm not wrong. But this is the first actual full condensed war, whereas you're seeing dozens, hundreds of threats, simultaneous ones on all the armored corps, and the war questions whether tanks should be active in such a war, in such a place, such as the Gaza Strip, whereas you have so many people in such a small place. That gives the answer.
Yeah, definitely. I think each operation, both here in Israel and abroad, we can see tanks are being deployed. They still feel a very important job or mission, and they live up to it. And I think Trophy or active protection systems as Trophy grants you these capabilities, which are really important in these condensed areas. I think living together with infantry, main battle tanks, and APCs together in such a condensed area is a challenging task for any system, for any army, and Trophy definitely, so far we've seen, well, I would say, performances advertised as said. So, and I think that the soldiers see it too. You saw, I think, interviews with division commanders and both with chief of staff saying how well protected are these platforms and how well the maneuverability is right now.
Furthermore, all of them entered the Gaza Strip.
Correct.
In a Namera APC or in a Merkava tank, as well as I did, entering the middle of Gaza, the Shati refugee camp, with a Namera protected with a Trophy. What do you hear from the troops themselves?
We won't go into details exactly about these or that operations, but I will say that we have great numbers of successful threats interceptions so far, and I think the results, the operational results we are hearing on, and we don't have the freedom of action to maneuver in that safety inside.
Obviously, you know, it's a major point of interest, not only for us and our allies, but our enemies as well, because killing a tank or killing an APC gives a huge win or trophy to our enemies, because they're not only taking out a tank or an APC, but killing a lot of soldiers at the same time. Do you see them busy with that? Busy with your system?
I think the other side and our enemies in that case, looking at depriving Trophy and the tanks and the APCs out of their capabilities, so far with none to minimal success on their side. And I think this is something that since 2014, since the last real operation with the maneuvering forces inside the Strip, this is the second time now we see these forces, and they have learned about the system. They take that into consideration, but still we have also learned and we've improved the system since then. Since Trophy was first deployed, it has been improved over and over again. And the IDF, and as well as other customers and users around the world, have witnessed improvements in the system, enhancements in the system to cope with new threats.
For any of our viewers who is not familiar with the Trophy system, which is largely exposed within the last decade, share some details regarding the system.
Yeah, so Trophy is what is called an active protection system. Pretty much it intercepts in a standoff distance RPGs, ATGMs like Cornet, for example, that we've talked about. And these kind of threats, when you take them out in a standoff distance and not on the platform, which was usually done before the invention of APS, that allows to minimize the damage to the platform and to the troops and actually protect them. That is done in a quite sophisticated way. We cannot share all the details, but along with protecting the troops, it also allows you to pinpoint your shooter, the shooter of the ATGM or RPG, and actually
eliminate them.
Eliminate them, yeah. You actually create targets on the go. And that is a great combination, both of protection and being able to attack back and destroy the enemy.
Which we mainly see on a northern front with Hezbollah using the Cornet rockets for a much larger range and the ability to give the IDF, the Israeli army, the ability to kill our enemies.
Mm-hmm. That happens in all terrain, I would say. And the capability has been proven so far in the past and also in this operation right now, in both fronts. And that's a standard of our system. That's one of the key capabilities of our system. And we introduce that with any new platform that is getting Trophy. That is a key capability we stress our customers and our users to use. And it's proven. You see how well it works.
So beforehand, we've touched our enemies. Let's speak about our allies. You've sold your system to the Americans, to the Germans, to the Brits, to the major tank suppliers, manufacturers in the world. Most of them didn't practically deploy it in a war, so they're looking at us saying, okay, what do you learn? What do you know? What can you tell us?
Definitely.
What do you tell them?
So I think first everybody see the current operation, the use of Trophy. Also, I think the lack of APS and the lack of Trophy in the Ukraine-Russia war also gives you an example what happens if you maneuver without an APS, without mature APS such as Trophy. And our allies, the Brits, the Germans and others, see their main battle tanks, the Leopard and the Challenger, being deployed in Ukraine against Russian threats, which are similar to what we see in this arena in Israel, and being destroyed. Firstly, again, being destroyed, meaning destroying the platform and destroying the troops inside, but also depriving Ukraine from maneuvering. And this is something that our allies look closely on, and we try and share the messages and lessons learned. We are still in the midst of the operation, so it's hard to say lessons learned in this timing, but we are learning on the go.
One last question regarding supplies. You know, we're in a war in Israel, so obviously your supply chain is packed with demands from the IDF because most of the systems are heavily deployed in Gaza, and you need more and more new ammunition to come on. How do you keep on supplying our allies, your customers overseas?
Yeah, so 2 years ago we've established Euro Trophy as a joint venture company in Germany, in Europe. And we've established production lines as well as other maintenance services and so on to help that security of supply of active protection systems as well as any important military equipment is key on winning any war. And we see that now in Europe. That's one of the I think great aspects of having a trophy in Europe, and this is why we established Euro Trophy.
Dan, thank you.
More to come in just a minute. Don't go anywhere.
Israel is at war. Make an investment in Israel bonds. It is the most powerful and direct way to stand with Israel. Visit israelbonds.com and invest now.
Made for Me, a unique concept in Israel. Custom-made men's fashion to your measurements. Made for Me, designer of all your events. Schedule your appointment at www.madeforme.co.il. Made for Me, official dresser of I-24 News.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Israel is in a state of war. Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front line, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
You're watching Strictly Security Live. Thank you for staying with us. Let's turn to the field and to our correspondent, Gazriel, in the southern city of Ashdod. Guy, give us the update, please.
Yeah, so it has been quiet several past hours here in the south of Israel. It's been 5 hours now since the last rocket fire from Gaza into Israeli territory. Of course, as the IDF continues its operation across the Gaza Strip, both in the north, attempting to take over Hamas in the Sajaiya neighborhood of the outskirts of Gaza, but also in Jabalia, and more importantly, surrounding the city of Khan Yunis in the south, obviously a major stronghold of Hamas on the way to eliminate Hamas's military capabilities in the Gaza Strip, one of the main goals of this war. Of course, earlier we did see rocket fire towards many areas in Israel, including Beersheba and Tel Aviv, and in Ashkelon, not too far from here, a direct hit into a home where a mother and her 2 children were able to escape just seconds before the rocket hit their living room. Now, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant was asked this evening about the legitimacy of Israel to continue with the war. His answer is, we don't have the legitimacy not to continue this operation. Obviously, the goal to return safety, sense of security for Israeli residents on the southern border.
Thanks, Guy. Tensions rise in the Red Sea as Yemen's Houthi rebels target Commercial ships claim to have ties to Israel. Denying the allegations, Israel accuses Houthis of jeopardizing regional navigation. The Pentagon reports multiple attacks on vessels from 14 countries, highlighting the broader implications as the U.S. Considers responses. Concerns mount over escalating maritime unrest off Yemen coasts, threatening vital trade routes.
Yemen's Houthis are escalating attacks on commercial ships in the Red Sea, raising concern for the safety of key trade routes.
The naval forces of the Yemeni armed forces, with the help of Allah Almighty, carried out this morning a targeting operation against 2 Israeli ships in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The targeted ships were the Unity Explorer and ship number 9. The first ship was targeted with a naval missile, and the second ship was targeted with a naval drone.
The Iranian-backed militia said attacks like those on Sunday would continue until Israel ends its strikes on Gaza. But the IDF denied the ships had any connection to Israel and accused the Houthis of endangering the freedom of navigation in the region.
One of the ships was damaged in a very serious way, and it seems that it could be in danger of sinking, and other one was lightly damaged. This is an event stemming from negative sabotage of the Houthis. We need to see how the world will answer this issue.
The Pentagon said a total of 3 commercial vessels connected to 14 separate countries were attacked in 4 incidents in the southern Red Sea from Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. The Bahamas-flagged Unity Explorer bulk carrier was attacked in the morning and then again in the afternoon by anti-ship missiles. Then, the Panamanian-flagged number 9 reported damage but no casualties caused by a missile from Yemen. A third ship, the Sophie II, which also sails under Panama's flag, said it was struck as well but suffered no significant harm. A U.S. warship operating in the area assisted the commercial vessels by shooting down 3 drones, while the Pentagon accused Iran of enabling the Houthis' attacks.
This is also one of those allegations aimed at projections, which are made in line with efforts to deviate public opinion of nations and to cover up crimes by the Zionist regime and the U.S. government.
The U.S. says it will consider all appropriate responses in full coordination with its international partners. But in the absence of significant action, such attacks off the coast of Yemen will only increase in frequency and severity.
Soldiers, policemen, and plain civilians took up arms and went out to defend their communities on October 7th, knowing that they are the last line of defense for their families and friends. Our next story tells the story of Yossi Tahal, an accomplished fighter in the IDF and in Israel's internal security service, who lost his life fighting to defend his community. Here is his story.
I miss him so much. My heart is dead. Why couldn't he be more careful? How? How could they not save him?
Stay strong like you are. You cheer me up all the time.
It's true. It's so painful, it's impossible. I can't believe that Yossi was taken from me.
In fact, I went there with the feeling that this wouldn't happen to me.
For what purpose? Why is he part of it?
Yossi, the good Lord protects him.
But no one defended him.
Until October 7th, Mazal and Elitar knew nothing about them, not what they looked like, or what their real names were. These are the friends of her son, Yossi, killed on October 7th, who remained in the shadow.
I never knew them. I've never seen them. And I said to myself, What a shame that Yossi never came home with them for dinner. Now when they come here, they give me a little bit of strength. But I miss Yossi a lot.
We spoke on Thursday morning. Maybe now is the time to show what he wrote to me?
It was Thursday.
You read it. I can't.
Dad, I want to tell you how much I love you and really appreciate that you're here by my side. You give me strength when I need it. Always thinking, always thoughtful, warm, friendly, with logic, and always sincere. It is important for me that you know how dear you are to me. I love you, Yossi.
Those are three of the most valiant elite fighters in the secret and very special unit of the Internal Intelligence Service, the Shin Bet. They are here to meet Yossi's parents and tell them about the side of Yossi they knew less about.
He had a strong personality. Those who knew him got attached to him in seconds. At all levels, from the simple soldier arriving at the unit the day before to the IDF chief of staff. He knew how to connect with people. Just like that, he gave so much of himself. He would meet someone, and 2 days later is invited over for a barbecue dinner. We don't wear our ranks. We don't treat people based on their position. People follow us because of the leadership, because of the personality of whoever leads the unit. And Yossi was all of the above, big time. He knew how to speak to people and touch their hearts.
We cannot show Yossi's photo, and his face will probably never be known to the public.
Our slogan is protect and not be seen. In 99% of cases, we were the ones to surprise the enemy. We are the initiators, those who direct the situation. On October 7th, we were surprised by the intensity of the attack, the way it was done, the numbers. And that was what put us in great difficulty in the first hours of the attack.
In many ways, Yossi is like Emmanuel Moreno, the heroic fighter of the famous Special Forces Commando, Sayeret Maktal, but in the ranks of Shin Bet. Tales of his bravery and everything he did on October 7th will remain secret, except for what the censors allow us to reveal.
It was 6:30 in the morning of the 7th of October. I received the first phone call from Yossi. He told me, "You're not going to believe it. There's something weird going on here." He was talking to me from his shelter and told me that he will call me back when he's on the road to decide what we're going to do.
As we drove south, we realized that one of our fighters was hit, and Yossi, with another small team of fighters, responded driving towards the terrorists under heavy fire. He was in an area he didn't know, and we could not yet understand the scale and complexity of the attack and the number of terrorists. He was able to reach our struggling fighter after a few minutes, and Yossi actually saved his life. Outside, violent fighting was taking place on all sides, and Yossi realized that the evacuation is well managed. It's under control. He analyzed the situation perfectly and said to himself that he is the force closest to the kibbutz Mefalsim and decided to support the fighters in the area. Yossi is an experienced fighter with a lot of hours of combat under his belt. He comes from Shetet 13, the Marine Commandos. Yossi was in a different level than the rest of us. He often faced terrorists, participated in many operations against them, and had a lot of experience. Pretty early in the fighting, he was able to get hold of one of the terrorists' tactical radios. At first, he listened to what they were saying, trying to figure out where the terrorists are.
They killed 2 terrorists in a van. They saw another group of about 10 terrorists up the road. He ran to an open area, and the terrorists were hiding behind a concrete shelter at the entrance of the kibbutz. At this point, he had been hit, and that's where he died. I heard on the radio that Yossi was wounded, and the next call I got was not from Yossi. It was from our medic.
He came by here.
He told me, "Man, I can't keep fighting to save Yossi. It's done. And I know both of them very well. And I know about the commitment we have towards each other here. However, when he told me that he did everything he could but could not save him and that was the end, I realized that we're dealing with a totally different situation here.
Did he suffer?
No.
He didn't suffer?
No, he didn't suffer. First few days after Yossi died, I didn't want to deal with it. I tried to keep busy, don't think about it. I tried to erase it. Sometimes I'd wake up at night saying to myself, it can't be true. But after about 4 days, I stopped on the side of the road and said, I can't put it away anymore. Just like that. I wanted a moment to process. And I got on WhatsApp and listened to some of the messages he has sent me. And the last one was a song This song suddenly hit me. It cut off half my heart. And I just stopped. This repression disappeared all of a sudden. Emotions came pouring out. It overwhelmed me because you hear Yossi in his own voice singing a song that is almost like a prophecy.
Yossi was the son of every parent here in Israel. He defended them all by himself. All of them. He protected the state of Israel. He even told us once, if not me, then who would do the job?
He's not here. It's just the body. Physical matter here. Materiality. I respect the cemetery and the burial, which is important in Judaism, in our heritage. But for me, this is just a stone. Like you said, it's not him. It's a stone.
I think that if there's, as they say, a world beyond this one, I am sure that he's up there giving it all he's got. I have no doubt.
Grief hit Eli 3 times during his life. His brother, Lieutenant Colonel Yossi Tahar, a senior officer at the Paratroopers Brigade, was killed in July of 1981 fighting in Lebanon.
It was a huge crisis in my life, a very, very difficult crisis. I've carried it around for a long time. 20 years later, when Ro'i was killed, then they asked me, they told me, you must be used to it. But I said that that was not the case. Now I understand what my parents felt.
Roy, Eli's son, fighter in the Nahal Brigade, was killed in a motorcycle accident on October 2001.
When Ro'i died, a part of me died. It didn't hurt. It was just that a part of me was dead.
Eli was sure he had already paid the ultimate price, and that Yossi, despite serving as a fighter who in the Navy Commando and later in the Shin Bet would not be harmed. That's what almost everyone thought, those who knew Yossi.
At one point I said, that's it. I have the impression that that's it. He's safe there, with this protective layer around him. I thought he was safe.
Yossi had something immortal about him. In the eulogy, his commander said that when Yossi would stare death in the eyes, death would back down.
Many Israelis owe their life to Yossi, and they don't even know it. Beyond the fact that October 7th, his actions stopped terrorists from entering in the kibbutz of Mefalsim, he is responsible for hundreds of foiled attacks over the years, in service, and only a handful of which we were allowed to mention.
Nothing could have prepared Imri Bonim, a member of Kibbutz Re'im's security squad, for the Black Saturday, which changed his life and the lives of Kibbutz Re'im civilians forever. For long hours, Imri and 5 other security squad members fought bravely, accompanied by a couple of policemen only, preventing dozens of Hamas terrorists from committing a complete massacre. Now Imri returns to the kibbutz and walks us through every step and decision he made that day to ensure
his loved ones may remain safe. Gili Elad brings us his story.
At 6:30, we woke up to explosions from another world. Only this time, 20 minutes later, we heard small arms fire coming from very close. And that's something we're not used to. I started organizing my equipment, and I received the following voice message on the kibbutz's security squad WhatsApp group.
חבר'ה, לפתוח מכשירים, יש כבר הרוגים על 232 ואופנועים שנוסעים לכיוון אופקים.
Here on this road, we see vans loaded with equipment, an RPG with a machine gun on top, ready to kill anyone. Terrible chaos, and above all, the realization that we are alone. That it's just me and my friend Tuvia who need to stop all them from entering the kibbutz and committing a complete massacre here. We began to move forward through the animal grove towards the community centers where our 1st through 6th grade kids are educated. We heard them come in, break down the door. We knew the first thing they'll see is miniature Sukkot and other artworks that were made by our children. We knew they were going to go room to room, not to find any children, but to destroy all the childhood things belonging to the people from the kibbutz. For around 2 hours, we were fighting this squad. We shot at them from the outside so they would be afraid on their way out, so they would believe there are many more forces around them that they can't even see. At 9:17, Oran sent this voice message.
אילן, אנחנו עם החוליית משטרה פה, בכניסה לקיבוץ מאחורה, ועכשיו יש רכב קרקל של המשטרה שרץ על הציר הזה.
As soon as we heard this, we left the neighborhood and ran to another one. There was a Caracal vehicle outside the fence which opened fire on the terrorists. Here, there's a descent into a parking lot. We hid and we shot the terrorists from behind. At this point, we begin to see large fires inside the kibbutz. It was clear to us that something bad was happening on the other side of the kibbutz. So we ran to a house at the end of the kibbutz. In this safe room, there was a family, and the door was already starting to melt. They were suffocating, but with a final effort, they managed to lift their girl, who was in a wheelchair. We got her out, us and the policeman, while the 2 parents, with great courage, came out as well. After the first family was rescued, we arrived here. We knocked and told them they could get out. When the mother came out and I wanted to tell her all animals from the kibbutz's animal corner are fine, because I knew how important that was to her. She immediately asked if we knew what was going on with Asaf, her son, who had been out of touch. I had a very bad feeling about that. Asaf wasn't with them at the time. In the kibbutz, it's common that at the age of 18, you get your own small apartment. Everything that happened had been happening in the young person's neighborhood of the kibbutz, because that neighborhood is the one closest to the main gate from where most and the best equipped terrorists had arrived. They planned to conquer Reem and stay here, to enter the houses. The fighting in this neighborhood was led mainly by IDF forces that came after Haran. The kibbutz's security chief managed to stand on this sidewalk, making sure that the terrorists did not reach the kibbutz. He stopped them in this neighborhood. This was the point when my role as the kibbutz's protector ended, and then I started helping the IDF forces find their way through the neighborhood. We went to pick up another security squad member. On the way, some safe room window was opened, and someone who didn't live there came out. He told us that the father of the two children who were in a safe room, the father and his girlfriend were murdered in front of the children's eyes. Then he showed us what the terrorists wrote on the wall. "We do not kill children." I stand there and I look around. Right next to all of that, there was a children's gate with lots of bullets in it, and the father's hammock, and it was clear to me that in other places things were even worse. That not everyone had 2 minutes to get organized and make decisions like the ones we made by the very heroic people out here. It was an understanding that we are the last line of defense to the people who chose to live here, who chose to plant a tree here, to join the beautiful culture of this place. And we must do our best to protect that.
And before we sum up, we'll go back to the north of Israel and to you, Zach Anders, with the update.
Well, it was a day that saw continued rocket strikes, heavy rocket launches from Hezbollah, one of those falling over Kiryat Shimona. We were able to see some of the damage, and it was light, and bits of the rocket fell in the middle of the road. The road was already able to be repaired, the hole that was made by the impact. And many of the people, the residents of the neighborhood in this area have been evacuated or are staying elsewhere in Israel. So it was a success in averting any sort of catastrophe or loss of life. The IDF says that's why these evacuation orders are in place, is because this threat continues with these launches. Today, the IDF says no recorded injuries, unlike 2 days ago when we saw as many as 12 injured in separate strikes, and those injuries were minor. So it continues to be the question here as to how long this conflict continues to be a rolling boil, where Hezbollah forces strike from a distance, use the mountainous terrain to their advantage, and then retreat farther into southern Lebanon to try and escape the retaliatory IDF strikes. The IDF says today, once again, they were striking those positions with artillery and with airstrikes, attempting to eliminate the points of origin from where Hezbollah was launching earlier today.
And Zach, we have half a minute, so we'll use it to ask you, do we see civilians coming back to their homes, or the area is still empty?
It's largely empty, and you can tell by the stores that are closed up as well. There are people, though, that want to return. We've seen in the last week that residents of this the community here urging the cabinet to give them some sort of guidance as to when they can return, or for more support, because many of the evacuees don't have a solid timeline for when or a solid amount of financial support for funding these long hotel stays.
Yes, Zach Anders in the north of Israel, thank you so much
for this late report, late hour. Thank you so much. Keep safe. And that's all the time we have for this special edition of Strictly Security, coming to you live from the Jaffa port. We'll be back